Okay, so today we're going to be mixing Japanese milk bread. And in the bowl here I've got all-purpose flour, I've got yeast, salt, and sugar. That's all in the bowl of the dry ingredients. Let's kind of get those mixed together a little bit. The unique thing about Japanese milk bread is that it calls for, if you follow the directions, you will see it says take about 3 tablespoons of the flour and the water that's in the recipe and cook them together in the microwave. And that's what I've done here. They turn into a thick paste, and basically a great deal of the liquid that's in this recipe is trapped in the starches in this mixture. This is a Japanese technique where they pre-cook some of the flour before it goes into the dough. Thereby the moisture is in there, but it's trapped inside the starches. The rest of the liquid is going to be milk, which we'll put in there as well. And if you research this method, it's being used quite heavily by sourdough aficionados on YouTube, partly using the Chinese version of this. It's called tangzhong. And the tangzhong technique essentially is to pre-cook some of the flour. Why would you want to do such a thing? Well, what it does essentially is it traps a lot more moisture in the dough. And for sourdough people who are mixing a lot of sourdough, they're getting a lot better handling characteristics from the dough. It handles better, it doesn't stick as badly. It's much, much easier to work with. All right, so this dough is just starting to come together. I'm going to put it out on the board, and we're going to go ahead and knead this by hand. And as we knead it, we're going to work in the butter. There are there's about 2 ounces of butter here. So I'm just going to start working this together until it starts to come together as a dough. Like any time we're adding butter or any sort of high amount of fat to a dough, we want to try to get the dough started first. Give it a chance to get started, give it a head start, because once the fat is in there, it's going to start to shorten the gluten. Now this dough is going to be a little on the sticky side. There's no doubt about it. As you can see by my fingers, it's starting to stick pretty badly. But we can deal with that. We've dealt with sticky doughs before. So as I work this together as a dough, it starts to barely come together as a shaggy mass. Then we'll start working in some of the butter. I'm going to take a couple of pieces of this butter and just press it down into the dough. And just start folding it in, just start working it into the dough. And Japanese milk bread is a special type of dough, a special type of bread. It's very highly prized in certain parts of Japan. It is very soft, makes great sandwiches, and I think what they really like about it is the softness of it. So you notice this butter that I'm putting in, it's already soft too. I let this sit out on the counter for a while, and I let it get soft so that it'll mix into the dough nicely and fairly easily. So I'm going to put the rest of the butter in here. Just working it in, just kind of pressing it into the dough. As you can see, I'm just sort of working it in, just trying to get that butter incorporated. There's no clean and easy way to do this. You just have to make a space for it and live with the stickiness of the dough. Just work it on in. Okay, so we'll let this sit in the bowl. Needs to ferment for about an hour. Roughly an hour. We want to see this double in size. And remember, it's not going to just come straight up. It's going to spread out first. So it's probably going to fill the bottom of the bowl, and it's probably going to rise up a little bit, but that's what we're looking for, about double in size. So we'll come back when it's done that, and we'll be ready to shape. This dough does not involve any folding. So if you read ahead in the recipe, you will start to see that what we do with this dough afterwards is we're going to hand knead it a little bit more after it comes out of fermentation, and we're going to roll it out and shape it for a loaf pan. So preheat your oven. We got about an hour, and we'll come back. All right, it's time to shape this dough. We're going to put down a little bit of flour. Just going to give it a little bit of kneading, just to make sure that it's sure it's degassed and it's not sticking too badly, but right now it is sticking somewhat. Now we're going to roll this dough out. A little bit more flour on there. Okay, so with this dough rolled out, we're now going to cut it in half. Lengthwise, which I know it doesn't seem to make any sense, but this is the way they do it. This is the way it's done in Japan, and this is what they prefer. We're going to roll up each one. As you can see, all rolled up into roll. Roll up the other one. All right, now these are going to go in a loaf pan. And they're going to go in sideways. I'm just going to kind of spread them out evenly, and these are going to proof. They're going to proof until they fill this loaf pan. They're going to fill it, and they're going to come up to at least up to the top of the loaf pan before we bake it. Then we're going to bake these off, and it's going to bake at 375. It's going to take a little while for this to proof, so I'm going to set it aside. Put some plastic over it and let it proof. Make sure to let it proof completely. You know, don't get impatient. Make sure to let it do its full proof. Otherwise, you'll end up with a dense bread. And better to have a nice soft bread. That's what this is meant to be. It's meant to be a nice soft bread. So we want to see all the spaces in here filled. We want to see it rising up, so it's peaking up just above the loaf pan. Once it's up to the top of the loaf pan completely, it's time to bake, but not before. So here's the finished loaf. And in Japan, people love this because if they don't want to buy a full loaf of bread, they can buy half a loaf of bread. This just came out of the oven. What we'll probably do is we'll probably brush it with butter, and that will be how it finally ends up, nice and shiny, and just a wonderful loaf of bread. Post your pictures. Make sure to get yours done, and I'll be looking forward to seeing your work.